Hello, welcome. Are you here for a cup of tea? Nice. We are in Chengdu, China, the home of the Szechuan pepper, Szechuan sauce. This is the fourth biggest city in China. It's also the home of the third best economics university in China, Southwest University of Economics and Finance. So we are here to talk about development and growth. Now, what better place to talk about development and growth? We see that before the year 2000, GDP of China was very low. The aggregate GDP was lower than Spain, it was lower than Portugal. And if we think about it, it didn't make much sense because we have a population of 1.4 billion people versus populations of 50 million. So how come the aggregate GDP was so low? Well, it's because they were mainly trading among themselves. And once they joined the WTO in 2001, the World Trade Organization, the government, which intervenes a lot in the markets, they were able to put in place supply side policies. They had very good roads, trains, ports, and these enable supply chains to develop, manufacturing cities to develop, and also the movement of people from the agricultural sector into the manufacturing sector, which is part of the Lewis model of growth. And if you think about a farmer who grows his potatoes, the same person in the city would be able to produce a lot more in less time, and at the same time earn more income, higher income. So we had many people, low wages, we had infrastructure, we had sort of subsidies and investment from the government to develop this infrastructure. We had labor specialization, and then we had growth. We have an explosion in GDP. We have plenty of things globally were made by China because of the good quality, because of the cheap cost in terms of manufacturing, and good technology. Now, all this growth eventually has slowed down for a variety of reasons. We see the financial crisis of 2009. We see the sort of barriers to trade. We see trading blocks. So supply side policies that encourage growth eventually reach sort of their limit, so to speak. And now what we see is a change towards more demand side policies to encourage consumption and not just be dependent on production. But this is sort of a natural flow, because when we see the average person, we see that as their incomes rise, they're more picky in what jobs they want to take. So potentially they might not want to work in a factory. We also see the demand for foreign products. So many of the cars, many of the products are also from abroad. We see the dependence between China and other countries. So let's look at sort of what are the challenges. So one of the challenges would be, countries like the US might say that they're losing jobs because they import things from China. But then, they put policies in place to reinvigorate manufacturing or the manufacturing of steel. And when they do so, they find that they have no supply chains. They find they have not the right technology or skilled workforce. And also think about, the young generations. They don't really want to spend time in a factory. Potentially they want to spend time behind a computer. So it doesn't quite work. And then following on that, we see Biden thinking about bringing back strategic industries, such as the manufacturing of chips. So a big company that manufactures this is TSM, and they brought it. It was in Taiwan, then they bring it all the way to the US. But again, they face the same problems. The lack of technology, supply chains, skilled labor. So what these challenges? How can China overcome these challenges? So we see demand side policies taking the scene. Demand side policies comes across from consumption, and that actually is a problem here, because whereas in the West people consume and they have a high marginal propensity to consume, consume. Here, there's a high marginal propensity to save, meaning that they prefer to save rather than have a liability owing money to a bank. And this doesn't help the growth of the economy, the consumption of goods and services, as they're a bit more apprehensive to spend their money, although they're earning. Now, this is part of another model of growth known as the Harrod Domar. So the Harrod Domar model states that for an economy to grow, its people need to be able to save so that they can invest in their education, they can invest in future development or open their own businesses, which is made possible here. But to the extent that they're saving a little bit too much, and they want to encourage, they want to put policies in place for consumers to buy more products, to spend more money. So, examples of a lot of consumption here in China would be the purchase of cars, Western cars. They're very popular. We see the change in tastes from national goods to foreign goods. We see the purchase of things like video cards. 50% of the revenue from NVIDIA comes from China, from the demand for these video cards. So that drives growth here in China. As they demand more goods and services, they import more, there's also more production, and this sort of speeds up the growth and the change from an economy that was very much dependent on supply side policies and exports to one that is being driven by demand. A little bit like the growth of the US after the Second World War, which was driven mainly by demand. So where are we going with this? So we see that as locals, as people here, people don't want to necessarily, new generations might not necessarily want to work in factories, and also we see the negative impact, negative externalities of production affecting sort of the air quality, the stress they might have. They're looking at outsourcing things. So much of it is sort of taking place, or infrastructure is being built not in China anymore, but in countries in Africa. So they're thinking of moving factories abroad, so that all this sort of secondary sector of manufacturing will no longer be produced in China, but they'll be produced elsewhere. And China will be mainly sort of services, and it will be driven by consumption and to a lesser extent exports. So other things that are happening is they're building something known as the Belt Road, which is a connection between China and the West, which is a train track that goes across from Poland to China to have sort of better connection, to make it easier for travel and the transport of goods and services. It's a very interesting place to be. Plenty of growth. If I had to describe the city we're in, Chengdu, with one word, that'll be a very happy city. It's a city that has great infrastructure, 22 million people, yet you have plenty of space. A mix between new and old mixed together. We have tea houses instead of coffee shops. We have a sort of the food. They're very much individual businesses that provide food rather than sort of franchises or chains. And it's something which is very nice to see, that sort of the culture, a lot of the culture remains. So I invite you to come along if you have time, and I'd love to see you in one of these lovely tea houses. Till next time.